Hello everyone, I'm Allie and welcome to StampNation. Today I am going to talk to you about using pattern paper on your cards. And we're so lucky to have so many amazing companies that produce some really cool pattern papers. And this is just a handful of some of the recent ones that companies that I enjoy working with have produced here. We have everything from, this is actually an 8x8 pad of a variety of base solids. We have some gorgeous plaids. This is brand new from Lawn Fawn. We have Echo Park with a themed paper pad for birthdays. This is a really cute one by Tailored Expressions with a red, white, and blue theme, which is adorable. Then we have some gorgeous kind of spring and summery color palettes from Penny Black. And this one's a little softer and more muted. And of course, more plaid. So I'll bring in a few cards and we'll talk a little bit about picking papers, why you would pick a paper, and we'll go from there. So this is my first card. It's very, very simple. And generally, for me, and not for everybody, I generally start with my image as a starting point for my card. I knew I wanted to create a thank you card for the lady who sent me some amazing purple onion design stamps. So I wanted to make sure I used one of her images and created a card to send back to her to thank her for those stamps. So I knew I wanted my theme to be thank you, of course, but I wanted it to be fun and bold and whimsical. So I went looking for some papers that were nice and bright. So that's where I brought in this Kaiser Craft. And it has some polka dots and florals and wood grain and butterflies and solids versus multiple patterns and colors. So, I mean, it even has matching embellishments as well. So when I look for pattern paper packs, I always look for a good mixture of patterns. This one is really nice because it does actually have some more, and I would consider this almost a solid because it's one color. This one would be closer to a solid than a pattern. You know, it depends on the size of your card too, as to what the size of your print, what works for it. So when I started this card, I initially had picked out the pink polka dots. I knew this was a color that I wanted to include. So in order for my whole card to work, I took all of the pattern papers that I chose and put the colors and sank the colors back into my image. This keeps everything unified, so all of my touches of brown are actually in the brown details of the wood grain. So again, you're tying your pattern paper and your image together by using the same colors. So I pulled in the green and the hot pink into its little t-shirt there. And of course the green, I also pulled it in again as well. Now, when you're talking color theory, you want to think about the whole concept of gallon, quart, and pint. So for instance, on my card, the portion of color that I used for my gallon, which means that I used the most of that color in my card, would be the pink. So I tied my pink in here, 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 here. There's a fair amount of pink. Then you want to talk quart, which is you want to use probably about a quarter of another color. So I would probably say my tealy green is my quart amount. No, it's a little bit more than a quart as far as the whole percentage of my card is concerned, but I didn't use it more than the pink. And then the pint, which would be the very small accent color that I wanted to pick up, was on my green. So I used a lot of pink, a smaller amount of tealy green, and then a highlight color or a pop, just a little teeny bit of, would be my limey green. So when you're thinking about your composition and the use of pattern papers, you can also think about colors and how much of one color you're going to use versus another. So a large amount, a smaller amount, and then a highlight or a pop of. Okay, let's bring in another card. So here's card number 2, and I initially started my card off with my blooms. This is where you can use a lot of patterns of paper all at once. So I heat embossed using my Zing embossing powder. This is called, actually it's called powder, that's the color of it. And I embossed my blooms on top of my small pieces of pattern paper. Great way to use up your scraps. Then I repeated this stripe on my card again. It helps to unify things by repeating it again. So I could have made my border around my pink polka dot really, really thin, but by repeating it with this, it ties my card together. So you go back to the color theory of gallon, quart, and pint, and I see, when I kind of blur my eyes, I see purple. That's probably my gallon portion of color. My quart would probably be the pink. And then my highlight color, or my pint, would be the pop of orangey yellow. So once again, I've repeated the colors. I've repeated my pattern papers. These two match, these two match. This is something a little different, but that's all right. And then my leaves pull in that green in that stripe. So don't forget to repeat your colors from your pattern papers, and whether that be using cardstock, I could have put an orange frame around this to repeat, or that minty green around to repeat that color again. So don't forget to try taking things and cutting them out. And this goes along for animals, it goes along for clothing. I even have an example that I did with a poinsettia, and I had taken different patterns of kind of this snowy, frosty green paper, and it had different patterns on it, and I cut it and paper pieced it together, this poinsettia, and each leaf was a different pattern piece of paper. So always remember that paper piecing is a great way to use up pattern paper. Now what's great about buying paper pads is that you get a whole collection that's based on a color scheme, like this one here called Butterfly Kisses from Kaiser Craft. It has the colors of yellow and minty green and purple and cream and hot pink. And what makes using paper pads great is that you've got a little bit of everything already kind of there in that paper pad. So if you're going to invest in pattern paper, and if you're just a card maker and not a scrapbooker, I suggest 6x6s or 8x8 pads if you're going to invest in for pattern paper. You just get a big bang for your buck because they're really not all that expensive. So this is my card number 3. And I began my card using the little bunny images here. And this bunny image is from Craft and Kimmy. And this stamp set is called Hello Spring. And that's where my card started. So being bunny rabbits, and because they're just so cute and soft and fuzzy, I wanted to make it a nice, light, calm kind of card. So I kept my color palette all in one tone. So for instance, let's pull in card number 2. This is bright and bold and happy, and that's the tone it kind of conveys, whereas this is soft and sweet and new almost. It's almost kind of like a new baby kind of nursery or new child, or that has that kind of feel. So I wanted to keep everything soft and muted. So when you're thinking about using pattern papers, think about what kind of message you want to convey with them. Okay, for instance, this card is not actually glued all down. It's still in actual pieces. So let's pull it apart and let me show you why things work and why things don't work. So I'm just going to pull my little parts. I have the only thing that's put together basically is my shaker and my plaid. Okay, so I have like a light gray undertone for the back with my light pink plaid to be nice and soft. Let's bring in some papers that don't work, and I'll tell you why they don't work. Always another thing to have in your stash is a great array of your pattern paper basics, from polka dots to stripes to chevrons to some cool plaids. Anyway, so let's play with our card using some of these pieces of pattern paper. Okay, green. This is a good example. So when I go to put on my shaker card and my little bunnies here on the green, just ignore the pink of the sequins here. But it doesn't quite work. It doesn't pop off the page. It gets lost. It doesn't tell me anything about this, the feeling I want to convey. Whereas when I go and put it on that soft checkered pink, it says, ooh, cutesy, spring, new, babies, hugs, love. It portrays that. And you can even have pattern paper change in color by whatever you put next to it. I mean, yes, this might work, but the tone of it is too bright. It's too bold. It's not the statement I want for my card. So when you're picking out patterns, think, okay, my card is a sympathy card. Maybe you want your sympathy card to be soft and caring and warm and nurturing colors. You wouldn't make a sympathy card out of bright neon colors. They would be more subdued. It's a more natural feeling to get for a sympathy card. Once again, it doesn't work. This one is too dark. It doesn't make this say light and airy. I hope I'm conveying what I mean by that. Play with your papers. Put your elements on top of one paper versus the next. Is your card saying, I know it sounds funny, but is your card saying, what do you want it to say? Is it saying, I'm sorry? Is it saying, hi, happy to see you, I miss you, or I love you, or just honestly, you have to think about what your pattern paper is saying. It's so funny, but it's so true. Let me bring in a few more examples. So we're talking about conveying a message. All right, my message for this particular card is love. You know, when you think love, you think reds and pinks. You think hearts and X's and O. So that's all conveyed on this card. We have hearts, we have X's and O's, we have messages, we have the word love. It all fits together. The story that the card is telling makes sense. So this is another one. This is an example from our challenge for StampNation. I have used my gallon, quart, and pint again. So lots of red, a little bit of gray, and a hint of kind of the gold color. So once again, use that color theory. You don't often need a lot of pattern paper. This pattern paper is basically picking up that pink. I mean, the main color of my card is white. The secondary color would be our tones of reddy pink, conveyed in the belly and the blossoms. And then we have like a hint of green as our highlight color. Once again, there is our color theory again. This card speaks about use the 6x6 paper packs as they are. They're already designed with the color palettes that you use and that you need. So all of these pattern papers, even though, believe it or not, this is a holiday set, work for this theme because they're generic. So I have a generic stripe, another generic stripe. It's supposed to be a starry night or a snowy paper. But because it's so generic in theme, it works for my kitty. So, and again, I have used the colors from the paper in my image. It all comes together and it all makes sense. So once again, the feeling of my card is love. And of course, when you think love, you might think of roses, just like Valentine's Day. So my paper mimics my theme. There are my little teeny roses. They're nice and soft and pink. The hue of everything on this card is all one hue. There's nothing too bright. There's nothing too subdued. It's all either creamy or light pink, and we have a little bit of a bold color, but I've pulled it into my row, so I'm making everything unified. Same goes with plaids. I actually went and picked the plaid first, and then I pulled all the Copic markers that were used in this plaid. So there's like 2 tones of teal, there's a limey green, and a cool purple. And I pulled it all in. So once again, it makes sense. All the colors that are used on the card. Here's another one. So I've mimicked the heart here in the message. There's a little bird here and a little bird there. The colors all make sense. I've pulled this color into even the leaves. Even the leaves are green. They don't always have to be green. So you'd be surprised at when you pull colors in from your backdrops, how lively your images become. Now, if I had stamped this image in black, it may not have worked. The tone is so different. Try stamping in browns or greens or grays to tone things down. If it had been stamped in black, there's nothing else really black on the page to pull it all together. So the brown, which is down in this kind of leaf that the bird is standing on pattern paper, that's where I pulled my color back in to make my image go with my pattern paper. This card conveys something soft and beautiful. So my colors are all kind of on the subtle, more sweet side. The card doesn't have bold colors. It's a statement of softness. So another point about using pattern papers, you always want to mix up your pattern papers in the sense that you don't want to have stripes and stripes and stripes and stripes. You want to mix them up with other patterns, because when you put multiple patterns of the same, at least directionality, sometimes it looks funny. Although you could go with a pattern like the chevron that we pulled in, and you could do strips of the same pattern, which would be all right. But if you're going for 2 or 3 or more patterns, you want to mix them up a little bit. So use your polka dot, use your script, use your butterfly, use your stripes. Mix it up a little bit. It always gives a little bit more interest to your cards. So keep that in mind. So to wrap up the lesson today, you want to think about pattern placement in the respect of different patterns. Don't put stripes next to stripes and dots next to dots. Try and mix it up if you can. Not for all cards, but generally works. Don't forget about portraying the right emotion. Is it a soft and subtle card? Is it bold and bright? How do you make your pattern papers say what you want to say? Don't forget about theme. Is it about love? Is it birthday? Make sure that your papers go with the theme of your card. You don't want to be putting birthday candles on a sympathy card. And last of all, try and use the gallon, quart, and pint color theory to help you with your colors and your pattern papers. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this little video. Please give it a thumbs up, and I hope that you'll contribute to our thread below and post a card with pattern papers, and I'll randomly pick somebody in a couple of weeks to receive a little gift in the mail from me. Thanks for joining me. I hope you had a great day.